Hi there, this is Matt Shinuel. I am just starting my Let's Play of Dark Souls. It's one of my favorite games of all time, which is one of the big reasons I'm doing it. But also, I have been working on a project for a little while now, where I am reading this game through the lens of Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces. In the book, Campbell takes a bunch of man's greatest myths and tries to distill them into what he calls the monomyth. So he breaks down a lot of the common story elements and beats, and attempts to sort of spin out what it is that makes these stories so compelling. As a unified theory, it's kind of bullshit, but it is also a library of a lot of great symbols and stories, and oftentimes he has a pretty good point that good stories can feature these elements of the human experience. And so he breaks his breakdown, he kind of breaks down myths into two categories: the hero's journey and the creation story. And where I'm going to be focusing mostly on the hero's journey initially in Dark Souls. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about creation stories later. But for now, let's talk about the hero's journey. And I think that Dark Souls hits a lot of mythic beats, perhaps accidentally, and fits really, really well inside the monomyth of the hero's journey that Campbell describes. So we're going to jump right in and take a look, and I'll try to go ahead and convince you that that is the case. So that's Darius LP, short for Let's Play. So, I don't need to tell you what it means to make a character in a video game, obviously, but there are some really, really interesting mythic resonances that occur with the creation of a character. Basically, the character is our body within a digital world. So we create this as an outside force, a god, if you will, and then inhabit it. And a lot of protagonists in myths are these sort of god-men, which explains their exceptional qualities, but it also sort of makes them iconic, that these protagonists are representative of humankind, and their story becomes a human story. Works in both ways. But certainly there is sort of that play whenever we create and mold an avatar and then inhabit it in the world, that we are an outside force acting upon it. Let's make him a farmer, huh? Proper hero's journey where he starts from ignoble beginnings. Give him wild red hair, dark red, and sure, looks kind of like a Weasley. But here we have Darius. We'll step right into the world. We're going to skip past this initial video. It basically lays out a creation myth for Lordran, which is really cool, and there's a lot of really interesting things to talk about there, but again, we're focusing on the hero's journey part of the monomyth right now. So, there are three core parts to the hero's journey. They are separation, initiation, and return. So, separation occurs whenever the hero leaves his place of home or of safety, or in this case his prison, a place of relative comfort, but mostly a place where there is no risk, to enter into the water world and receive the challenges and tasks that will make him a hero. I mean, that basically that makes him a protagonist. So that separation phase is very, very important, and it's what we're going to be focusing on in this video right now, because Dark Souls actually hits the beats of the separation quite well. But really quickly, the initiation is again heading out into the test, and the return is coming back to the society that birthed the hero with whatever extra knowledge or insights or treasures that he gained in his journey, and sharing them with a wider populace. So that's an important part of the hero's journey that we'll hit later on. but the separation phase consists of 5 elements in itself. The first one we just saw, the arrival of the Herald. And so that was Oscar Vestora up there, dropping a corpse into our cell that carried the key to our dungeon. And the role of the Herald is to force the player, or the character, out into the wider world, basically to provide that push that sends the protagonist rocketing out and away from the place of safety. In this case, it is the asylum. So right over here we've got an asylum demon, one of the great beasts that prevents ne'er-do-wells like us from leaving the asylum and forces us to spend our entire undeath lingering down here. It'll be important because he's going to be our first big threshold for exiting. A metaphorical gate into the water world that we'll have to overcome at some point. And that's really one of the interesting things about Dark Souls, and its particular telling of the hero's journey. It does it in a way that only games can do, basically by telling it, of course, through the events that happen to the character in the game, but some of the elements of the story exist only in the experience of the player, and it's expressed mechanically. So, we've just had our first phase, the arrival, the receiving of the key to push us outside and send us out to Lordran. The second phase is the refusal of the call, and it doesn't happen in all myths, but in some, the protagonist basically refuses to leave the place of relative safety, and instead avoid risk and remain as they are. It makes for a boring story, which is why the refusal of the call often isn't successful, but Dark Souls has something really interesting. So we've got our big double doors over there, which sends us out into Lordran, so that's where we're headed. But as we head in that direction, we are stopped by the asylum demon. Alright, so I'm currently armed with this broken sword, which does 2 damage whenever I hit him with it, right? So basically, it's going to be pretty much impossible to kill the asylum demon. People have done it because it's a video game, and that's what people do. But it's impossible, especially for the beginning character, or the beginning player, to engage with the asylum demon. And this is the really interesting thing, the thing that makes Dark Souls a unique take on myth that only a game can do. It makes us experience not just the events of it, but to feel it. Basically, we don't want to fight that giant creature. We don't have the tools for it, and so it gives us an out. It gives us a way to leave and to refuse the call, even though we'll eventually have to return after a circuitous path around the asylum. It's essentially walking us through the ritual of the hero's journey, making us feel those events and why they're important without telling us. So I mean, it's showing us that and giving us the experience of it. So the asylum demon is also a really, really great boss because it teaches the beginning player what's in store for them in the outside world and prepares them to fight massive bosses that tower over them. Important skills. And that's an important part of the threshold. Basically, it's the start of the liminal world where things really start to become risky, and it's a sign of what stands outside. As the gate to the outside world, the dangerous world of risk, it's representative of what's out there. So the white light, or the fog gates, are really, really interesting in the game. And this is something I want to talk about, because the hero's journey is sort of it's a very linear model of story. And so Dark Souls is an open-world game, and it captures that hero's journey feel by making us experience the basic beats of the hero's journey across many moments of the game, basically repeating the cycle of the hero's journey every time we approach a boss and slay it. Those fog gates are really, really important in that sense.
Thank goodness.
So here's Oscar Restorig in our Herald.
I'll die soon. Then